What's up everyone, welcome back to Tap Sac. Today we're going to do some Commander drafting. Thanks to Wizards of the Coast, we do have a box of the new Commander Masters draft booster packs. We're going to use these to show you how to draft in Commander. But first, let's talk a little bit about the draft format. So draft is a format whereby you don't need to bring your own deck. You actually build a deck through packs. So if you sit in a pod of 4 or 8 people, each player gets 3 packs. And then each player will open their first pack, pick a card, and then pass it around to the next player. So you repeat this process until all the packs and cards are given out. And then you build your deck and then start playing. So let's talk about how different Commander drafting is. So firstly, in a Commander pack, you do get more cards than a regular draft booster. So there are 20 cards in each of these Commander Masters draft booster packs. And each contains more than one rare per pack, so it makes it a little bit harder to pick. And the other difference in Commander drafting is that for each round you pick 2 cards instead of 1. So when you open your first pack, you're gonna have to look out for 2 good cards that you want to pick out and then pass it around. When you get the next pack, you will also pick out 2 cards again. You also need a legendary creature as your commander. So without a legendary creature or planeswalker that can be your commander, your deck will pretty much be unplayable. So always look out for one good legendary creature at least that you can build your deck around. So let's not wait any longer. Let's open this box and pick out a few packs. So one thing good about the draft booster box is that it comes with a nice cheat sheet, which tells you all the different archetypes that you can build in this set. Each set is going to be different, so you can't just use the same card for every set. But basically it'll tell you the different color combinations and how you would play the deck. So for example, you have blue-white as the first one, Flyer's Tempo. So hold your ground with tokens and defensive instants and sorceries, all while attacking from the air. So a basic beatdown deck with blue and white flying creatures. So when you're drafting, you will look out for flying creatures and for blue and white as well. So similarly, there are 10 archetypes that you can build. You don't have to follow these, but if you're new to draft, this is a really good guide that you can use early in the drafting process. You can start to follow one of these and then just stick to it for the rest of the draft. Alright, so let's open our very first Commander Masters draft booster pack. We're going to go through each card and then at the end pick out 2 cards that I think would be good for a draft, for your draft deck, and then I'll explain why as well. So these packs are thicker. Oh, we start with the token first. Okay, so tokens we would put aside in a draft, and then we have a foil card. I think there's a guaranteed foil in each of these Commander Masters draft pack. Not necessarily in other sets, but for this, yes, you do get 1 foil. So Champion of the Flame, pretty good for auras. Our rare is Stone Hoof Chieftain. So it's an 8 mana 8/8 trample indestructible. Whenever another creature you control attacks, it gains trample and indestructible until end of turn. So very strong on its own, indestructible. It also gives other attacking creatures indestructible, so that's very good. 8 mana is going to be hard to cast, but it is what you could say a winner in a drafting tournament. So we're going to put this down as our first rare. And then we have a Planeswalker, the Fairy Temporal Archmage. So Planeswalkers are like Planeswalkers can be your commander if it says so at the bottom. So in this case it can. And then what Teferi does is that you can +1 to look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one into your hand and the other on the bottom of your library, -1 untap up to 4 target permanents, and -10. Its best ability is you get an emblem. You may activate loyalty abilities of Planeswalkers on any player's turn. Anytime you can cast an instant. So pretty good. I'm going to put it down. Annex Hardened the Forge. This is an enchantment creature. It grows bigger if you have more red in your devotion, which means the top part here. And then when it dies, you create 1/1 tokens. So it's pretty useful in draft. It creates a lot of value. Ooh, we've got Uncommon Goreclaw, Terror of Kalsisma. So this used to be a rare, but now it's uncommon. It's a legendary creature, so it can be your commander. And what it does is that it makes your bigger creatures cheaper by 2 mana, and when it attacks, other big creatures get +1/+1 and trample. Oh wow, we've got a nice borderless card. This is special for the set. So Tron Dynamo is like a mana rock, we would call it. It costs 4 mana, but you can tap it immediately for 3 colorless mana. So you're building up for the future of the game. It's good to have sometimes in your draft deck. Feed Lash is equipment. So equipped creature gets +2/+0 and reach. And when it's dealt damage, it deals damage equal to its power to type player or planeswalker. So pretty good. Equip cost is 3, so not that cheap. Mace of the Valiant, another equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each charge counter on Mace of the Valiant, enhanced vigilance. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield on your control, put a charge counter. So it gets bigger as you cast more creatures. So you want to have a deck which has lots of creatures. Wildwood Scourge, another uncommon. Again with X +1/+1 counters. Whenever one or more counters are put on another non-Hydra creature, put a +1/+1 counter on Wildwood Scourge. Thriving Owl. This is a tap land, good for mana fixing. Crowsun Tusker, you can cycle it to search the library for a basic land card. Very good for ramping or color fixing, so very useful. Vial of Dragonfire can sacrifice itself to deal 2 damage to target creature. Supply Runners, when it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control. Wow. Terramorphic Expanse, another card that helps you search for basic lands, so very good for ramping. Faithless Looting, another good common card. You draw 2, then discard 2 cards, and you can recast it for flashback. Witching Well, another good artifact. It enters the battlefield, scry 2 for 1 mana, and then you can sacrifice it later on to draw 2 cards. Rapacious One, 5/4 creature with trample for 6 mana. When it deals combat damage to a player, create that many 0/1 Eldrazi spawn tokens, and they can sacrifice to add 1 colorless. Supernatural Stamina, instant, you give a creature +2/+0 and gains when it dies, bring it back to battlefield tapped. Ooh, Commander Sphere. Alright, this is a nice ramp card for Commander. Basically 3 mana. Tap to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So it used to be very common in Commander decks, not so much, but it's nice to see this first time in the borderless art. And lastly, Knighted Mirror. It's basically a 2/2 artifact creature with a Adapt 1. Okay, so that's how we draft. We look through the pack and then we kind of decide which card we want to keep for ourselves to put into our deck. And here you can see we have 20 cards. We have lots of rares actually, so it's going to be harder to pick. So the 3 rares we have are Chieftain, Stonehoof Chieftain, Goreclaw, and Teferi. We can only pick 2 cards, so if we're going for value in terms of rarity, then we'll pick 2 of these. But then we should also look at the rest of the cards and see how they synchronize or synergize with these. So what I spotted just now is that Goreclaw and Stonehoof Chieftain go quite well together, because Goreclaw makes the Chieftain cheaper to cast, so actually 8 mana becomes 6 mana to cast if you have Goreclaw on the battlefield. So what you could do is that you could pick these 2 cards and then in future packs pick big creatures in green, so that it will synergize with Goreclaw, and then you can pick a secondary color as well to play with green, so that you have more options to build a deck. So we'll put these 2 down right here as a possible 2 pick. For Teferi, I have not seen so far any synergy with the rest of the cards. Maybe Witching Well, which lets you scry. So it's all about looking at the top cards of your library, picking out the best card, maybe putting the lands at the bottom, and then get more value in the game. But for now, we'll just put these aside. Usually for the first pack and the first pick, we're not going to pick out the mana rocks, but these are actually pretty useful in draft, or at least commander draft, because when you have expensive spells, you want to have a way to ramp up quickly and cast those spells. In the case of Commander Sphere, it lets you add 1 mana of any color. So that's very good if you have maybe 3 colors in your deck, or even 4 colors. Maybe for 2 colors you don't need it, but it's still a good ramp card because you cast this on turn 3 and then in future turns you can cast your bigger spells. So not a pick on first pack, but maybe to keep for later. In drafting, I usually look out for synergy, and in this case, just nice we pick out 2 cards that synergize with each other. Green-white is a popular archetype that plays on +1/+1 counters, and these 2 cards are just right for that. So for example, if you cast Supply Runners, a 5 mana 2/2 creature, and then put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control, if you have Wildwood Scourge on the battlefield, then what happens is that for each other creature that gets a +1/+1 counter, Wildwood Scourge would get another +1/+1 counter. So Scourge would grow really big. Well, that is provided you have both on the battlefield and maybe a couple other creatures to make it more worthwhile. But this is a kind of synergy that you should look out for in drafting, whether it's regular draft or commander draft. Alright, so we've gone through a little bit of what are the top picks. I think for me, if this was my pack, I would pick the 2 rares, Goreclaw and Stonehoof Chieftain, basically because of the potential it brings for my deck. If I'm able to get more big creatures, whether in green or a secondary color, then Goreclaw is going to be very useful. It makes my cheaper creatures 2 or less, and then when it attacks, give all of these big creatures +1/+1 and trample. Plus, it allows me to cast the Stonehoof Chieftain for potentially 6 mana. To get an 8/8 trample and indestructible for 6 mana is very good. It's going to be a beatdown, because with trample you're going to power through any small blockers, and indestructible means the methods of removal by the opponent are going to be very limited. So combining these 2, you've got both value in terms of the rarity, you've got power level, a good power level in the game, because both synergize with each other. So this would be my first 2 picks for the commander draft. So these packs have pull tabs that make it a little bit easier to open. Okay, we start with the token, which you don't pick in a draft. Our foil is Windcaller Aven, a common. 4/3 flying and cycling for blue. When you cycle, target creature gains flying until end of turn. Pretty useful in terms of utility. It's a 4/3 flying, but it's for 6 mana. Our first rare is Arachnogenesis. So 3 mana, create X 1/2 green spider creature tokens with reach, where X is the number of creatures attacking you. Prevent all combat damage that will be dealt by non-spider creatures. So this is essentially a combat trick. You get to survive for 1 turn of attacks pretty much, and you also get to create lots of 1/2 spider tokens that you can block. So it's a one-time use as an instant, but it can be useful. Inspiring Statuary is our second rare. Non-artifact creatures you control have Improvise. So Improvise is a keyword whereby your artifacts can help you cast spells. If you tap them, they cost 1 less. Stitcher Giraffe, our another rare. It's a zombie focus commander, I feel, a legendary creature. So if you play 2 in blue, tap, each player mills 3 cards, exile up to 2 creature cards in graveyard, and create an XX zombie creature, where X is the total power of cards exiled this way. Oh, another rare. So 4 rares in this pack. Pretty good. Drakes, 5 mana 4/5, flash and flying, and bigger spells that cost 5 or more cost 1 less and can't be counted. We go into our uncommons. Lost Shield, it's good for artifact creatures. because prevent all combat damage that be dealt to artifact creatures. And whenever one or more artifact creatures enters the battlefield, draw a card. Triggers only once each turn. Path to Exile. This is one of the best removal cards in the game, and especially in Commander. Shimmermere, 2/2 artifact creature. Spectral Searchlight, basically a mana rock. Basically a mana rock whereby you add 1 mana of any color, and you can give other players that ability too. Prismatic Piper is like a backup commander if you don't have one. Snakeskin Veil is a nice combat trick, gives +1/+1 counter on target creature you control and gains hexproof. Volshok Battle Gear equipment gets +3/+3. Vizier of Tumbling Sands, 1/3, untap another target permanent, you can cycle to untap target permanent. Broken Wings, very common in green, destroy target artifact, creature, or enchantment. Creature with flying. Ooh, Kodama's Reach. In the borderless new art version, never seen this before. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put one in your hand and one on the battlefield tap. Kodama's Reach is also another very popular commander staple card, so it's good to have it. Luther Ilkor, 2 mana, 1/1 shadow. So when it deals damage to an opponent, draw a card and discard a card. Gutter Snipe, whenever cast an instant or sorcery, deal 2 damage to each opponent. Thorn of the Black Rose, when it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. In Einok Bonkin, 2 mana, 2/1, Outlast 2. Don't see Outlast very often, but basically it's 2 mana tap, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. And each creature with a +1/+1 counter has first strike. Oh, another borderless common. Dread Return. This is a reanimate spell, so return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. And you can recast it again if you sacrifice 3 creatures. So very good for reanimate decks. Not a lot of value in terms of resellability. I think Inspiring Statuary would be the most valuable. But we've got 4 rares to pick from. And then lots of other useful cards like Kodama's Reach, Path to Exile. They're all very useful in draft because one helps you ramp and then one helps you get rid of a creature. So now we have to pick 2 cards that we think are good for our deck. So first, let's go with the obvious synergy here. We have 2 blue flying creatures. They both cost a lot. Tricks cost 5 and they even cost 6. But they're both flying creatures and that fits into a theme, maybe into blue-white flyers if you want to build a deck around that. Tricks will help make even cheaper because it costs 6 and actually Tricks would reduce that by 1 mana. So that's very good synergy. Even also has the ability to cycle itself and give target creature flying. So even if you have a non-flying creature, that's not a problem. Even can give that creature flying if you cycle it. So in terms of synergy, these 2 cards are pretty good for a draft pick. You can start to build a deck around flying creatures, can be blue-white or can be blue and another color. So this is one of the best 2 picks for this pack. The other good pick of this pack I wanted to point out is Inspiring Statuary and Lost Shield, Clockwork Scholar. They essentially play around artifacts. So if you pick these 2 cards as your first pick, then you want to build your deck around artifacts, because Statuary will give non-artifact spells improvise, which means they will cost cheaper if you tap your artifacts, and Lost Shield will prevent all combat damage dealt to attacking artifact creatures you control. So if you have lots of artifact creatures and you can attack without worry, and then also draw a card when 1 or more artifact creatures enters the battlefield. So gives a lot of value. Lost Shield can also be a commander as a legendary creature. The last pair I wanted to point out, which is really tempting, is Kodama's Reach and Path to Exile. I think these 2 cards just generally have the most utility regardless of what kind of deck you play, as long as you're playing green or white. Because Kodama's Reach basically gives you a ramping spell, puts 1 land into the battlefield tap and then 1 more land into your hand. And this also gives you a way to search for the colors that you are missing. So Kodama's Reach is a very good card. As long as you're playing green, you probably put one in. And Path to Exile, just a very good removal in general. It only costs 1 white, and you exile a target creature. It's not even a destroy. So for example, an indestructible creature would still be killed by Path to Exile. The only drawback is that the opponent gets to ramp in terms of getting a basic land into the battlefield tapped. But that's a small price to pay for a removal card that is very powerful. So all 3 pairs are pretty good in terms of playability, but I think if you want to go for the win, then you probably want to pick one of these 2 pairs, because flying creatures is always an issue in draft. It's always difficult to deal with, and you can always fly over for the win. And this artifact synergy is very strong. So if you pick these 2 and then start to build a deck that is around artifacts and big non-artifact spells, then it's going to be really powerful. Personally, I think I might pick these 2 because I really like removal spells and I also like ramp. They're very generic right now, so I can put them into any deck rather than just tie down to one archetype at the start of the pack. But it's up to you. Whichever you pick, just make sure to think about what cards you picked before, look through the pile of cards, and then you'll be able to build a draft deck that can synergize well later on. Alright, so that's our basic introduction to Commander drafting and drafting in general. You're gonna look out for cards that have strong synergy, value in game, as well as maybe some value if you want to sell the cards in the future. And don't forget to pick out a legendary creature, as you need a commander to play in Commander draft. So we're going to give away all of these cards that we open on camera. All you have to do is just subscribe and leave a comment on which cards you want and why it might be good for draft. And maybe sometime in August we'll do a lucky draw and we'll try to give away as many cards of this as possible. So we also want to hope to hit 700 subs. So if we do that, yes, then we'll get all of these out to you. So some rares, some uncommons, lots of useful cards. Hope you will like and comment. Also do check out our website at tapandsac.com, where you can also find more articles on Magic the Gathering. So stay safe and see you guys at the next game.